Hi, I'm Marla. I gave my parents $27,000 to save their home from foreclosure, and then they cut me off. No thank you, no apology, just silence. But what stings more than betrayal is realizing I was never seen as a daughter, just a wallet that talked. Ever been blamed for the house you tried to save? Before we dive in, have you ever been guilted by your own family for simply walking away? What time are you listening to this, and where are you watching from? Drop a comment below, I'd really love to know. The bags were heavier than usual, or maybe I was just more tired. I had just finished a 12-hour shift, my feet were throbbing inside my sneakers, and all I wanted was to put the groceries away. Maybe sit for 5 minutes before heating up dinner for everyone. The kitchen smelled faintly of old coffee and lemon disinfectant, the kind my mother always used, but never wiped fully clean. I stepped inside quietly, the screen door tapping closed behind me. No one looked up. Lorraine was seated at the kitchen table, reading a flyer for a local art exhibit. Travis's voice drifted from the living room, something about a YouTube documentary on visual space and narrative. And Dad, he was in his usual recliner, the footrest extended, his socks curled at the toes, television remote resting gently on his belly. I set the grocery bags down by the sink. The plastic crinkled louder than I expected. Lorraine finally looked up. "If helping us is such a burden," she said, her tone deceptively light, "don't bother coming back next time." I didn't answer. I didn't blink. I didn't breathe. She returned to her flyer like nothing had happened. I stood there for several seconds, the fluorescent kitchen light flickering slightly above me, my hands still half gripping the grocery handles. My fingers had gone white around the knuckles. I wasn't angry, not yet. It wasn't even disbelief. Just a low, distant hum in my chest, like standing next to a train as it rumbled past, not quite touching you, but making everything inside shift. I looked at my father. He didn't meet my eyes at first. Just a lazy glance, one you give the weather or a passing neighbor. Then, after a pause, he muttered without looking away from the TV, "You know how your mom is." That was it. I stood there waiting for something else, a nod, a defense, a crumb of resistance to her dismissal. Instead, the silence settled like dust. Thick, gray, permanent. That sentence, his sentence, landed harder than hers. It said, "You knew better. You should have expected this. It's your fault for hoping otherwise." And maybe I did. Maybe I always knew it would come to this. But this time, something shifted. A thread pulled loose. I remembered my 27th birthday. I was late coming home, stuck finishing invoices after a double shift. I had picked up a cake, nothing fancy, just a store-bought lemon chiffon, and set it in the fridge before leaving again to grab Travis the textbooks he needed for his latest film theory course. I never got a thank you. No one even noticed I missed dinner. That memory floated in now, uninvited. I blinked and turned back to the bags. Out of habit, I started unloading. Cans first, then bread. My body moved without instruction, trained by repetition. But halfway through, my hand hovered above a loaf of sourdough. I paused, staring at it as if it might offer direction. Then, without a word, I placed the bread back in the bag. I zipped up my jacket, quietly slid my keys from the hook near the back door, and walked out the same way I came in. No dramatic exit, no slammed doors, just silence. The screen door tapped once more behind me, this time without return. I got into my car and buckled the seatbelt with a click that echoed louder than it should have. My phone buzzed against the console, a message from Travis. "Can you grab almond milk next time?" I didn't open it. I turned the key in the ignition, rolled down the window an inch, and drove. I didn't know it then, but that was the last time I would ever show up uninvited. The next morning, I checked my account out of habit. Not because I was expecting anything odd, but because old patterns die slowly. It was a quiet Saturday, the kind where light moves lazily across the kitchen counter. I sipped coffee, opened the banking app, and there it was. A transaction I didn't remember authorizing. $4,000, gone. Withdrawn from the joint account I shared with Lorraine. The label said, "Equipment." No further explanation. I stared at the screen, blinking twice, as if the numbers might fix themselves. I called her, more curious than upset. "Hey Mom, did something come up with the house?" She didn't hesitate. Oh, that. It was for Travis. He needed a new lens. He's trying to build his portfolio again. My hand froze mid-air. She said it like she was mentioning the weather, like it was the most natural thing in the world. I didn't realize we were still using that account for other expenses, I said slowly. Well, you weren't using it, she replied. And it's not like Travis asks for much. No apology, not even a pause, just justification. I hung up and stared at the kitchen wall. There was a crack running beneath the outlet near the stove, something I'd meant to repair last month. Now it looked deeper somehow. I remembered when we first opened that account. I was 28, freshly promoted, eager to be helpful. Mom had said, "We're a team, honey. This'll just make it easier on all of us." It had sounded generous at the time, practical. Now it felt naive. For the rest of the weekend, I couldn't shake the weight in my chest. It wasn't anger, not exactly, just disorientation, like realizing The call came just as I was heading out the door for work. Aunt Eloise's name popped up on my phone, a name that rarely called but never without reason. Her voice was soft, almost hesitant. "Hi, sweetheart. Quick question. Did you agree to co-sign a $5,000 loan with your mom?" I froze on the front steps, keys in hand. "What loan?" "She said you'd agreed, that it was all settled, just waiting on processing." My throat went dry. "I haven't signed anything." Eloise paused. The silence between us stretched until it became uncomfortable. "I had a feeling," she said. "That's why I called." After we hung up, I stood in the driveway a long time, the morning sun suddenly too bright. I opened my car door and sat down, but didn't start the engine. I was trying to replay the last few conversations I'd had with Lorraine, searching for clues I must have missed. But there weren't any. No mention of a loan, no hint, no warning. Only now a signature I didn't write and a debt I didn't agree to. The idea that my consent was optional. The message came late, almost midnight. A former colleague from my first job at the firm. We hadn't spoken in over a year. Her text was brief. "Isn't this your house?" Followed by a link. I clicked it. It was a listing on an NFT platform, one of those curated gallery-style sites where digital artists showcase their work. A photograph took up the center of the screen. The porch, the siding, the cracked driveway. I knew the angle. I knew the way the light hit it in the morning. It was my parents' house. Travis was listed as the creator. No credit, no mention, no permission. I clicked through the description. "A forgotten southern home rebuilt with heart," it read. A testament to restoration, resilience, and rebirth. My hands went cold. I remembered repainting the siding during a heat wave, sweat dripping into my eyes. I remembered power washing the brick walkway until my wrists ached. I remembered paying the contractor who replaced the roof, arguing with him over an overcharge I caught at the last minute. And now, it was art, sold, owned, labeled as his. My labor, my money, my memories. Flattened into a caption beneath a JPEG. I scrolled further. The NFT was tied to a scholarship application. Travis had submitted it as part of a creative arts portfolio. His artist's statement was what undid me. "After Hurricane Dalton, I spent 6 months restoring my family home," he wrote. That process, the sanding, the rebuilding, the sweat, shaped not just the house, but who I became as an artist. I gripped the edge of my desk, the wood cool against my palm. Hurricane Dalton had knocked out the gutters and damaged the porch rail. I paid for all of it. I had to take a weekend off work to coordinate the contractors because Travis had a weekend visual retreat he couldn't miss. He never held a paintbrush. He never lifted a hammer. But now he was the story's hero. I closed the tab, reopened it, closed it again. In my apartment, silence wrapped around me like a wool coat, heavy, itchy, impossible to ignore. I stood and opened the file cabinet near the window, pulled out the folder labeled House Ledger. I flipped through receipts. Roof repairs, $1,300. Porch sanding, $240. Paint, $126. The numbers were there, the proof was there, but no one would ever see them. There was no exhibition for daughters who paid in silence, no gallery for the ones who cleaned up behind everyone else. And still, I couldn't stop thinking, If I disappeared tomorrow, would anyone even remember what I built? I sat on the floor and opened my phone's photo library, scrolled past selfies, work events, old brunches with colleagues. Then I got to the photos of the house, progress shots I took to track each fix, each step. One by one, I selected them. Pressed archive. Not delete, not yet, just tucked them away, like me. I looked at my screen, now blank. The house, once mine, now belonged to someone else's version of the truth. If they can rewrite the house, maybe they think they can rewrite me too. The envelope was thicker than usual. I found it wedged between a takeout menu and a grocery coupon in my mailbox. Certified, from the bank. I tore it open, standing right there in the hallway, my keys still dangling from my hand. It was a notice of foreclosure risk. My stomach tightened as I flipped through the fine print. I hadn't sent money in almost 2 months, true, but I had assumed they were managing. I'd given more than enough to carry them through, and no one had said otherwise. No one had called, no one had asked. I pulled out my phone and dialed my father, straight to voicemail. I didn't bother trying again. Hours later, Travis's message lit up my screen like a flare. "This is all happening because you bailed." No greeting, no punctuation, no shame. I stared at it, reread it twice, then placed my phone face down on the table like it had insulted me in person. It wasn't long before the group text came. Lorraine started it, then Douglas, then Travis again. The tone wasn't questioning. It wasn't pleading. It was condemning. "You could have saved us. Again. You're not the daughter you used to be. This is what happens when family walks away." I felt the heat rise in my face, not from guilt, but from insult. I typed, then erased, typed again. I hovered over the send button. "I changed when you stopped caring who was paying the price." But I didn't hit send. Instead, I got up and walked into the kitchen, needing to move, to breathe. I poured water into a glass with hands that trembled only slightly. The ice cracked inside like something breaking apart. Later that week, I ran into my cousin at the grocery store. We hadn't spoken in months. She smiled awkwardly, then hesitated. I could see the conversation already forming in her eyes, the kind that begins with something you didn't ask for. "Aunt Lorraine said you're doing well enough to forget the people who raised you." I blinked once. That was all I allowed myself. She looked down at her cart like she was embarrassed, but not enough to take it back. I nodded. Didn't correct her. Didn't defend myself. Because by then, I knew. My mother wasn't just blaming me to my face. She was curating a narrative. One where I had abandoned them out of selfishness, not self-preservation. One where I was the villain in a story she controlled the telling of. That night, I sat on my couch, the apartment silent except for the hum of the refrigerator. I opened my phone and drafted a message. "If one more lie is told in my name, I won't be the quiet one anymore." I didn't send it, but this time I saved it. I set a reminder. 3 days. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I needed boundaries. Because silence wasn't working anymore. I used to think silence was strength. Now I know it can be mistaken for consent. I opened the spreadsheet I had named in a half-whisper weeks ago. Every dollar I didn't question. Each row a moment. Each column a compromise. I skimmed through the entries, mortgage transfers, labeled and time-stamped. Something didn't sit right. A number nagged at me, tugged like a loose thread I'd been too tired to pull. I checked the last 3 entries, one in February, one in March, one in April, all labeled mortgage urgent. I called the bank, voice steady, pretending to be an assistant confirming details for a family file. The woman on the other end was kind, efficient. "There hasn't been a full payment since January," she said. I stopped breathing for half a second. "I'm sorry, could you repeat that?" "Last payment received was January 12th, partial at that." I thanked her, hung up, then sat very still. I stared at the monitor, my reflection faint in the black screen as it dimmed. I had sent close to $8,000 in that time, money that could have gone toward a down payment for my own home, toward a business I kept postponing, toward peace. I opened my banking app and cross-checked the transfers. Every single one had gone through. No bounce, no delay, just gone, and none of it touched the mortgage. I opened the family group chat, typed, Where did the mortgage payments go? No one replied. The 3 gray bubbles never appeared. Later that evening, while doom-scrolling to distract myself, I stumbled onto a story from our old neighborhood Facebook page. It was a photo. Travis standing next to a blue sedan. Not new, but certainly better than anything I had ever seen him drive. His grin spread wide, keys held high. Caption, "Finally rolling again. Big thanks to the best parents ever." The same parents who just a week ago were telling me they were drowning. I didn't comment, didn't like, didn't forward it to anyone. I just stared at the image. Travis looked proud, unbothered, triumphant even. I remembered when the check engine light in my old Corolla came on and I drove it 2 weeks before fixing it because I was still sending $300 a week to help cover utilities. That night, I pulled out my receipts, printed them one by one, taped them to a wall like a storyboard, labeled them with a pen, underlined the word mortgage until the ink bled through. Then I took photos, uploaded them to a folder titled Receipts They'll Pretend Don't Exist. I wasn't angry, not like before. I was done being surprised, done giving the benefit of the doubt. I whispered to no one, "You don't get to lie and spend my silence too." Before bed, I logged into the legal client portal I used at work, searched formal financial misrepresentation in family settings. It didn't matter whether I pressed file or not. Just knowing I could was enough, for now. I used to think being useful made me safe. Turns out, it just made me easy. It was waiting for me on the kitchen table. Plain white envelope, no stamp, no return address. Just my name, written in her handwriting. Loopy, almost sweet. I stood for a moment before picking it up. I knew what it was before I opened it, the way you know the smell of rain before the first drop hits. My hands didn't shake, but my chest tightened like my ribs had decided to brace themselves. I peeled the flap open slowly and unfolded the letter. You walked away from us when we needed you the most. We raised you better than this. Not a greeting, not a pause, just blame from the very first line. I kept reading, even when I didn't want to. She said they had to fend for themselves after I stopped sending money, that I had abandoned my responsibilities as a daughter. That family was supposed to be forever, that I let pride make me cruel, that they forgave me, even if I didn't deserve it. It was a masterclass in deflection, a rewrite of history in her own ink. And not once, not a single sentence, said she was sorry. I didn't cry. I folded the letter back up, creasing it as gently as I would a photo I didn't want to damage. Then I placed it in my file cabinet under Family, next to every transfer receipt, every dated email, every screenshot of unacknowledged support. It joined the evidence. The next morning, I got a message from my father, short, no punctuation, no capitalization. Your mom means well. You're just stronger. You can take it. I stared at the screen, not surprised, just hollow. It wasn't a defense. It wasn't support. It was a nudge toward guilt dressed up as admiration. They had always counted on me being the one who kept quiet, who bore the weight, who fixed the broken parts and never asked why they were always broken in the first place. This time, I didn't feel strong. I felt used. I walked to my desk and opened the family folder. I flipped through the pages, digital and paper, receipts and records and small reminders of all the times I showed up. I ran my fingers along the column labeled Mortgage Support, another labeled Groceries Emergency, another Car Repairs Travis. Every dollar, logged. Every ask, granted. Strong doesn't mean silent. Strong doesn't mean stupid. I opened a blank message on my screen, typed slowly. Don't contact me again unless it's to apologize, in full, with names. I didn't send it, but I saved it, bookmarked it. The cursor blinked at the end of the last sentence, almost like it was asking, ready? They used to say I was their backbone, but this spine has a limit. I opened my laptop that night without emotion. Not out of anger, not out of hurt, just done. The kind of done that comes after you've screamed in your head for weeks and finally gone quiet. I pulled up the folder labeled Receipts They'll Pretend Don't Exist, clicked Create PDF. Each page was meticulous. Amount, date, description, transaction ID. I included screenshots, bank transfers, Venmo notes, all of it. from the very first grocery bill I covered to the last mortgage payment I thought I was making. There was no summary, no commentary, just the numbers. I titled the document, "In Case You Forgot," attached it to an email to Lorraine Skinner, Douglas Skinner, Travis Kitt. No message in the body, just the file. I hit send, then closed the laptop. I didn't feel vindicated or scared or petty, just empty in the way someone feels after putting down a weight they'd carried so long they'd forgotten what their arms felt like without it. Hours passed. Nothing. No typing bubbles, no calls, no defense. But around midnight, a single message popped up from Travis. Wow, that was dramatic. That was it. No denial, no rebuttal, just discomfort dressed as sarcasm. I didn't reply. The next morning, I woke up to a notification from Venmo. Douglas had sent me $1. The caption read, "Starting the repayment plan." I stared at it for a long moment, not because it hurt, but because it didn't. It was meant to mock, or maybe dismiss, to pretend none of this mattered. And for the first time in months, I laughed. Not the kind that warms a room, the kind that slips out hollow and cracks the air. I closed the app, blocked all three, not out of rage, just out of finality. Because if I kept waiting for them to see me, to value me the way I kept proving I was worth, I'd go bankrupt in more than money. So I deleted the Venmo notification, changed my email, closed the joint account, removed my name from everything I could think of. Then I walked to the mailbox, holding one envelope in my hand. It was addressed to my attorney. Inside, the start of a formal disassociation of shared liability and all financial ties. My last gift to them would be this: freedom from me. They sent me $1. I sent them my silence. Both had value. Mine lasted longer. The morning light in Austin always felt gentler, less demanding. It spilled across my balcony in soft patches, warming the cement beneath my bare feet as I sat with a cup of tea that had long gone cold. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like I was waiting for a call, a message, an apology that would never come. I opened my journal and wrote the sentence I'd been holding inside. They finally did it. They cut me off. There was no ache in the words, no bitterness, just an odd kind of clarity. I had always expected the end to be louder, more dramatic. Instead, it arrived in silence, and somehow, that made it feel more real. Later that day, I opened my email and saw it sitting there. Subject: no more contact, from Lorraine. We won't bother you anymore. It's clear you don't want to be family. That was it. One line, no greeting, no sign-off, no apology, just a final dismissal dressed as grace. I read it twice, then a third time. Not because I was surprised, but because some part of me still hoped I'd missed something. A sentence, a word, a hint of remorse. There wasn't any. I hovered over the reply button. Then I clicked delete, and just like that, it was over. But even in the quiet, a strange heaviness remained. Not the kind that pulled me down, but the kind that lingered, like a bruise under skin that had already healed on the outside. I thought back to when this all began. I was 24, newly employed, nervous, hopeful. I'd offered to help with the mortgage because it felt like the right thing to do. My mother had cried then. "You saved us," she'd whispered, hugging me tighter than she had in years. Now, no one remembered, or maybe they chose not to. I closed my laptop, leaned back in the chair, and let the breeze move across my arms. This was the kind of peace I used to fantasize about. I hadn't expected it to feel so lonely. Freedom doesn't come from being forgiven. It comes from forgiving yourself. And I had. A week later, I signed the lease on a tiny office tucked inside a quiet building 2 blocks from the lake. It smelled like old wood and fresh paint. The windows rattled slightly when it rained. I loved it immediately. I started taking on clients again. Women mostly, rebuilding after loss, betrayal, bankruptcy. I didn't share everything about my story, just enough to let them know they weren't alone. On the top shelf of the filing cabinet, I kept one folder. It read, "What I survived to build this." Inside were printed bank statements, a copy of the PDF I had sent them, and the final message that never got a reply. Some things deserve to be kept. I stepped into the office on my first Monday morning with a small cardboard box under my arm. A mug, a notebook, and a single photo frame. I placed it on the desk. It wasn't a picture of my family. It wasn't even of the house. It was of me, alone, on graduation day, holding a rolled-up diploma, squinting against the sunlight. No one else in the frame. I smiled at it now, the same way I wish I'd smiled then, full of pride, not waiting to be noticed. They may have cut me off, but I was already done bleeding. Maybe what hurt most wasn't the money, or the silence, or even the rewriting of history. It was realizing I had spent years trying to earn love that should have never come with a receipt. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this: boundaries don't make you heartless. They make you whole. Walking away isn't weakness. It's wisdom earned through scars no one else sees. To those watching this, especially if you've ever been the quiet one, the responsible one, the forgotten backbone, I see you. And I hope you know, it's okay to choose yourself. So, what do you think? Have you ever had to walk away from your own family to finally feel peace? Do you believe healing can happen without reconciliation? If this story touched you, drop a 1 in the comments or tell me where you're watching from. And if it didn't resonate, tell me why. I want to hear your side too. Make sure to subscribe for more true life stories that hit where it hurts and heal where it matters. Thank you for being here. You matter more than they ever told you.